You're listening to Searching for More, a podcast of the Diocese of Arlington. On this episode, Dr. Michael Horne, Director of Clinical Services for Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Arlington, discusses basic principles to help us maintain good mental health as we reintegrate into public life following stay-at-home orders.
But that change is going to be taxing. So we need to make sure we are doing all the things possible to keep ourselves in the best mental health, which includes the best physical health.
Here, Dr. Horne offers practical expert guidance on how to best navigate the many changes we've been experiencing and positively reintegrate moving forward. This episode's host is Billy Atwell, Chief Communications Officer of the Diocese.
Dr. Michael Horne, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
That's my pleasure, Billy. Thanks for having me.
So, obviously you've got a doctorate in clinical psychology, and you work with Catholic Charities in the diocese in a couple of different capacities, but really helping people deal with anxiety and depression and different issues like that. As we've gone through the coronavirus pandemic, what has your work looked like, and what are some of the things that are maybe new that you're helping people with that you weren't working with before?
It's been an interesting time. I mean, I don't think anybody could have predicted exactly how the needs would shift throughout the diocese. And in some ways, the needs haven't shifted, but the ways that we can reach people have changed. So I think that some of the big changes that we're seeing is during this time, especially during the stay-at-home orders, people's anxiety and stress levels and depression were all going up. And certainly at Catholic Charities, we wanted to continue to be able to serve people, but we couldn't see them. We couldn't get them in the office. So we made a very quick shift to teletherapy, which was not something I'd ever done before. And that's been really effective. In fact, in some ways, much more effective than I anticipated it would be. So now we have the opportunity to continue to provide the same high-level quality services that we would pre-pandemic, but just in a way that it's easier for people to receive the services. The obstacle of having to travel in has been removed. So I've been doing more of that, just trying to pitch in and help. I've actually been taking on a few more clients during this time. Other things that I've had the opportunity to do is I'm very fortunate to be able to help out and write a couple articles here and there for Herald, just to talk about what does mental health look like at this time? How do we take care of ourselves when we're in a situation that we have no game plan for? I don't think anybody, in January thought, here's how I'm going to respond to the fact that I'm going to be socially distanced from my friends and family and loved ones for 120 days.
Right.
Here's how I'm going to respond to not being able to go into a church for Easter. All of this was stuff that we really had no idea how to cope with, and we've all just done the best we could as we went along. Basically just trying to take the next best step at every opportunity. And it's truly been a joy that I've been able to try to help people in taking that next best step.
How much has teletherapy changed the clinical psychology field? Obviously, it's been kind of a short window here, but how much of this do you think is going to remain and be used as maybe a primary tool for some clinics and so on moving forward?
It's a great question. I think that I certainly have come around on teletherapy. I was really not in favor of it prior to this because I didn't think it was as effective. Obviously the preference is always going to be for that face-to-face encounter. But I've been surprised at how effective it has been. And there are some situations where if the choice is the person receives services via a teletherapy platform or not at all, then obviously we're going to go with the teletherapy. There are some situations where it is a little bit more difficult. We found it's challenging to do things like play therapy or work with young kids. Those are really things that really do need to be face-to-face. But I'd say probably 85, 90% of the things that we used to do, we're able to do just as well. So it's certainly something that on a personal level, I'm really thinking that I'm going to keep some sort of hybrid form of this. So once we're able to get people back in, there probably is going to be a blend. And it's been great, too, to reach people who otherwise might not have been able to come in. We've had the opportunity to serve people now as far out as Luray, who wouldn't necessarily be able to get into one of the 22 different locations that Catholic Charities has. Even with that high number of locations, that high geographic reach, it's still tough for people to come in, especially if they don't have regular transportation or if they live close to somewhere, but they just don't have access to get out of the house and get in, or if they have difficulties with childcare. So being able to offer this in a hybrid form is going to continue to reach people that otherwise would have a very hard time getting the professional services that they need and deserve.
And so you're the Director of Clinical Services for Catholic Charities, and so you're dealing with a lot of people who either traditionally wouldn't be able to afford counseling or whatever, but I would imagine even for those in very high income brackets, just because of work schedules and life demands, it's hard to cut out the time, especially in this area, to drive to, your counselor's location, then the actual time of the session, and then getting back. That can eat up 3 hours or more of someone's time, depending on what it looks like in terms of commute. So this is something that really seems to be broadening opportunities for everybody to get any counseling or psychotherapy that they might need or want.
That's right.
That's pretty positive. So you talked about some of the upsides, which are, a little bit obvious, in terms of access, but you've seen it to be effective. What are some things that you've seen that are maybe downsides from it that are reasons that people should consider that if they can go to in-person therapy, they should still do that?
There are going to be some situations where still that face-to-face is going to be the most important. If people either struggle with technology on a practical level, either they don't have access to the technology to connect them, or they're just not comfortable using technology, obviously those would be reasons to come in. But there are other situations as well. If somebody has a real tragic and severe trauma history, they might struggle to really feel that their counselor is present to them if it is mediated by a screen. There are some times that we want that direct encounter. We want that ability to see the person there in front of us, to be in the same space, and to know that they care about us, to know that they actually want us to flourish. And while the technology has been great and in many ways a literal lifesaver during this time, it still can't fully replace those face-to-face encounters.
Yeah.
In the same way that, I can talk to my wife over FaceTime or over a platform, and I can talk to my kids, and that's all great, but it's not the same as being able to be there with them, to hold my children, to give my wife a kiss, to physically be present. Those are the times where we feel closest to people. And counseling obviously is a very important, intimate working relationship, where you really want the client to understand that, yes, absolutely, unequivocally, I care for you and for your best interests. And I'm going to be there with you no matter what.
That's great. Yeah, that's really helpful insight. As we've gone through these changes of the last several months, and we're kind of beginning to shift back into what we would call normal. What new normal looks like, who knows? But as we go through that, what are some basic principles that you would recommend for us to navigate this situation with good, mental health and stability?
I think one of the things we need to remember is that any change is going to be stressful. Even if it's a good change, there are going to be some people who are so excited to get back to phase 3, to start to have more of those restrictions and regulations relaxed. But that change is going to be taxing. So we need to make sure we are doing all the things possible to keep ourselves in the best mental health, which includes the best physical health. So ironically, a lot of the things that we were doing during the lockdown, during the stay-at-home period, we want to keep doing. Examples of this would be we want to eat well. We want to avoid a lot of junk food. We want to make sure that we're eating a balanced diet, because the way that God made us, the way that we are designed, is that we need to have a good, healthy diet. We can't just survive on Snickers bars and pints of Ben & Jerry's ice cream.
How dare you?
Those things are. I know. It's really almost heretical of me to say so.
That's all the time we have for this podcast, but thank you.
So what we need to remember, though, sometimes if we're going to eat a lot of that junk food, if we're going to eat a lot of things that, emotionally we're drawn to under stress, there's a reason why it's called comfort food. It's because in the short term it makes us feel better. The problem is what happens is that our blood sugar goes up and then very quickly comes down. And after a blood sugar crash, our bodies actually release stress hormones. So what that's going to do is that our bodies now have to cope with these additional stress hormones, which taxes us physically. It taxes our immune system. And we're not independent systems. A person's physical health isn't separate from their mental health. It's not like we're a car where you've got your hydraulic system and you've got your electric system. I mean, if you've ever talked to a 6-year-old about whether or not they feel worried or anxious, they don't sit there and say, yeah, I feel really worried. They say, my stomach hurts. There's a clear link that the understanding of sometimes we experience emotions bodily. Our emotions affect our body, and the reverse is true. So if we are eating really well, if we are having a good balanced diet, that will actually contribute to good mental health.
It sounds like, just kind of piggybacking on that for a second, is when you're doing things that you know are good for you, that helps your mental health. So it seems like there's a physical neurochemical, I'm sure, component to it, which is by giving your body the right nutrients, not just avoiding bad stuff, but really targeting the good stuff, that you're giving your body what it needs to physically, fight against anxiety and depression and those kinds of things that are so easily plaguing us. But there's also something I would imagine that when you eat a salad and you've got good fruits and vegetables in front of you and you're eating, like that seems like it would subconsciously lift your spirits that you are being productive when you're sitting down with a candy bar, if you're eating, a fattier food or chips or something. No one sits down and feels like that was a good life choice. I love kettle chips are like my biggest downfall. If my wife puts a family-sized bag in the cupboard, she needs to lock it with a key or else it's going to get demolished, especially if it's jalapeno. But I've never eaten those and said, boy, I'm the best version of myself right now. But when I eat a salad, I'm like, hey, good job you. You did the right thing.
No, that's right. I mean, I think, we can do things that might not be our favorite thing in the world, but we know it's good for us, and that is going to have a positive boost. I mean, look, we can all admit that, eating quinoa and jogging doesn't seem as much fun on the surface as, eating chocolate cake and lying down. But the truth is, it's when we are investing in those good, healthy choices, we do start to feel better about ourselves, both physically and emotionally. And actually, the physical activity is good because as you are more physically active, your body releases endorphins, and that's going to reduce stress and improve your mood as well.
Yeah.
One of the things very early on here, so I'm obviously in prior to this bizarre time, I used to be on the road a lot. I'd be on the road at least 4 days a week. It's now been 120 days since I've seen I-95. I don't even know if I-95 is there anymore. It could be. It probably is.
Sadly, it is.
So, I've been sitting in my office in Fredericksburg, and I'm just obviously very grateful to have this. But after about a week, I realized, wow, I'm really stationary right now. I am not moving around a lot. So I had to make a conscious choice to say, okay, you know what? I don't have the time right now to go running or the option to go to the gym isn't even there. At least let me get up and start moving. So, if I'm on a phone meeting, can I walk through the office? Can I stand up? Can I move around? Because it is good to get moving. And all of these things ultimately are going to help us feel better because the more our bodies are rejuvenated and recharged, the better our mental health is going to be.
Yeah. I've talked with folks that have struggled with some of the mental health issues that are fairly common. Getting bad sleep seems like a common thread through those where people struggle to get sleep. Maybe it's because the anxiety of whatever they're dealing with in life is what's keeping them up, and it be kind of a revolving door of issues there. But so you talked about eating right, you've talked about exercise and moving. What role does sleep have? What advice do you have for people who, because of stressors in their life or whatever it might be, are struggling to sleep? What do you recommend for them?
Sleep is critical. I mean, just like, we need to eat well, we need to be active, we need to make sure we are getting enough sleep and at the right time. So the way that our bodies work in terms of sleep does two things. When we are asleep, our bodies physically repair and our brains are more active. You get more neural growth and neural development when we sleep. That's one of the reasons why we drink. So if you don't get enough sleep, then your body doesn't have time to rebuild and recharge. If you get too much sleep, you wake up feeling groggy and exhausted because your brain has been on hyperdrive for 12 hours. So you want to make sure that you have that good 7 to 9 hour range of sleep. And this can be really difficult in one of two directions. Either we are very depressed and the idea of being up and being out just seems exhausting. So we sleep a lot more. We stay in bed for 12 or 14 hours. Or we're so worried that the concern is, you know what? As soon as I put my head on my pillow, I am alone with my own thoughts. And all the stuff that I have wanted to deal with all day is all going to come crashing down, and I don't want to do that. So the temptation is, let me just stay up. Let me watch 2 more episodes of whatever I'm watching on whatever streaming service I prefer. Or let me surf the internet a little bit more. Or let me play these video games. Or let me just read a book. If we are using all those things to avoid the stress that we might feel prior to going to sleep, that's not going to be good. And it's going to start taxing our systems. It's going to wear us down. So we need to be able to make sure that we are sleeping, and not just sleeping the right amount, but at the right time. Somebody can say, well, I'm getting 8 hours of sleep. I sleep from 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. I'm sort of living on the Hawaiian time zone. That's not great for us either. And I think a lot of people are more likely to stay up later. But we are not nocturnal. We want to make sure that we are trying to stay on as normal a rhythm as possible. The other benefit of that is that sooner or later, we are going to start going back into what life used to look like. And most of us don't have jobs that start at, 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. in the afternoon and go until 11 or 12 at night.
Right. That's all very practical and extremely helpful. One thing, you've written a number of articles for the Arlington Catholic Herald, which first, thank you for doing that, because I know it takes a lot of time to write, but you've done a handful of them. And for those that are interested in them, if you go to arlingtondiocese.org/coronavirus, you can click on a link there for faith and family resources. And we've got all of the links to the articles that he's written there. You can also obviously go to the Herald site and just search Michael Horne in the search box, and you can find those. But you did one about how to talk to children about COVID-19, and I was reviewing one of those, and there's something that really stuck out to me. And one of your tips was, don't make promises you can't keep. And the reason is because my instinct with my kids when they would be nervous about something is, I will never let anything bad happen to you. I always want to say that. And I probably said it a couple times, not thinking it through, and then I realized later, just recognized I shouldn't say that, leading up to it. Is because I can't keep that from happening. Of course, bad things are going to happen. I can't avoid that. I will always do my best to protect you, all those kinds of things. But, what do you recommend for how we talk to our kids about these issues without scaring them? My instinct to say, Daddy will never let anything happen to you, is because I don't want my kids to think I'm unaware of the issues, and I want them to know I'm there to protect them. But how do we communicate about issues like this in a balanced way where we're not, as you say, making promises we can't keep?
Sure. No, and those are critical. I mean, to your point about making promises we can't keep. So I'm from New Orleans originally, and one of the major challenges that people saw after Hurricane Katrina in 2005 was there was a tremendous amount of anxiety that kids had. And if parents were to say nothing like this will happen again, parents don't have the ability to prevent hurricanes. And they noticed that children were becoming much more anxious the next hurricane season when they saw reports of hurricanes coming. So we want to take a more balanced approach. We want to make sure that we are showing kids we hear their concerns, we understand their concerns, and we're doing everything we can. So part of how we can do that, we want to be honest with our kids, but we don't want to give them too much information. So I think it's best to start by asking kids, so what have you heard about this? And this is something my wife and I did early on with our kids around the coronavirus. And we said, what are you guys hearing about this? Because we don't necessarily want to start throwing things at them that they've never considered or weren't previously worried about, and now we're just feeding additional things in their little minds that now they've got to worry about. So if you can ask a kid, what have you heard? What are you worried about? And then address those concerns. You can speak specifically to the concerns that they have. Let them ask questions. And it's okay if you don't have the answer right then. You can say, look, we can go ahead and we can find that out together. But kids also might not have questions at that time. You might talk about something and say, okay, so, we've been talking about this virus. We're talking about going back to work. We're talking about going back to church. Do you have any questions about that? And they may look at you and say, no, I don't. That's okay. They might have questions later. You can let them know, look, if you do, I'm here. Come talk to me. We can always talk about this. because the most important conversations that we are ever going to have with our kids don't happen in just one sitting.
Yeah.
There's always an opportunity for back and forth. There's always an opportunity for follow-up. And we just want to make sure that we are present physically and emotionally, that we're tuned into our kids so they know whenever they happen to have questions, we are available. They can come to us.
Yeah. It's interesting with our kids, we thought they were doing really well through the whole thing because school's getting canceled. We're having to explain all that to them. And, a couple, 2-3 weeks probably go by and, they seemed to be adjusting fine. They weren't talking about it at all. And at one point we were sitting down talking to them and my wife said, what are you guys looking forward to about when coronavirus is over? And two of our kids started crying, and the other one was kind of just sad-faced all of a sudden. It immediately turned, because there was this, we created a platform for them to open up about what was stressing. Yeah. And we felt so guilty that we hadn't done that far before. And we were glad that we eventually did it, but it was interesting. They talked about missing their teacher or their friends or different things, that they really missed, that they were holding in, and we didn't know. Our kids are open to talk to us. We talk to them a lot about different things, but my wife had the idea to just open that door, and I'm so glad that she did because it really changed things a lot. And now since then they've been able to talk to us more and share. But you've got great advice, and I've seen that in my own. I wish I'd gotten that advice a little earlier. I would have.
Sure. Well, it's fantastic that you and your wife did that. I think sometimes as parents we want to. The temptation is to put on a really brave face and just say, "No, it's fine. We're going to be fine. Everything's okay." Now, that's not to say that you want to take the opposite approach and just panic all the time, but we can be candid with kids about how we're feeling. So, if we ourselves have concerns, which I'm sure all of us at some point did. We can say, we're almost giving kids permission to feel worried by saying, you know what, just so you know, this is really hard. There was a conversation I had fairly, probably about the same time I think that you and your wife had this conversation with your kids. I talked to the kids about how hard it was to not be able to go to Mass. And I was surprised at their response because they said, we really miss Mass too, and we didn't know if you did. And I realized, gosh, I've been trying so hard to hold it together and show everything is fine. I want to let the kids know that it's okay to grieve. It's okay to have these concerns. Because if we understand their concerns, we can address them and talk about the ways that we're doing things to keep them safe so they feel more confident. There was a fascinating encounter I had with my 7-year-old daughter. This was on Holy Saturday. And we're decorating for Easter. By far and away the strangest Easter I've ever had in my life. Yeah. And we're decorating, and all of a sudden my 7-year-old goes, "Daddy, is the Easter Bunny coming this year?" And I thought, oh my gosh. I never even considered that she would worry about that. I said, oh, yes, absolutely. The Easter Bunny is considered an essential worker. The Easter Bunny is going to come. It's going to be no problem. And I'm thinking, funny. Great, okay, we're good here. And she paused, and she said, "But Daddy, what if the Easter Bunny is an asymptomatic carrier?" Now, this terrified me for a couple of reasons. One, I thought, oh, boy, I've forgotten how smart my 7-year-old is here. And two, my wife and I really need to be careful about the conversations we're having in the kitchen when we think nobody is listening in the living room.
Yeah, that's right.
But, I said, it's okay. The Easter Bunny's really good about washing his paws. And that was fine, and that sort of settled things down for her. But that was a great reminder for me to say, okay, clearly there is some unspoken anxiety here. Clearly this is on their minds. So let's just show people what we're doing to stay safe. So, we sat down with the kids and said, yep, Daddy, at the time I was still going to the grocery store. When Daddy goes to the grocery store, he wears a mask, he washes his hands. When we go out, we wear a mask, we wash our hands. We want to make sure that we are keeping ourselves safe, but also what we found out our kids were worried about wasn't just are they themselves safe, but they were worried, what if I catch something and pass it on to somebody else? What if I get somebody that I love sick? And, being able to say, look, we're doing this to make sure that not only are we okay, but we're taking care of the people in our lives that we know and love to make sure that they're doing okay too. And they are also taking the same measures to make sure that they're keeping themselves safe.
For kids who are of the age where they have cell phones or an iPad or, regular computer access and so on. Everyone is more immersed in technology now than normal, and it's in part a good thing because it's kept us connected to people and we haven't felt as isolated because of it. But as we go back and start reintegrating and socializing again, that obsession, with technology is probably not going to be as healthy. How do you recommend that people switch back to a, kind of the new normal and not be too obsessed with technology? I mean, you've talked in the past about the dangers of too much use of technology. While we've kind of suspended that for a short window here, I'm sure you have concerns about what that looks like going forward in terms of people's mental health. What is your recommendation for folks in getting back to normal?
Absolutely. It's a great point. Yeah, and sort of as a side note, it's been a really interesting time because obviously, you and I have spoken before about kind of my views on technology and how it can really keep us from genuinely encountering other people and how it can detract from our ability to have solid relationships if we're too dependent on it. Well, you flip to this time, and I'm grateful. I really am grateful that we have the technology, but we know it's not a substitute. This has just been a bridge. It's been a really helpful thing to get us through a time that we couldn't otherwise be together. I think that for a lot of people, there's going to be such a hunger to get back to their friends that they will naturally gravitate back towards those in-person encounters. But if there are kids who are more anxious, there might be a temptation to really hold off on those encounters. Say, well, I've been doing fine. I'll just keep FaceTiming my friends. It's okay. I'll just keep talking to people online. It's all right. I don't know if it's safe out there. So what we really want to do, we want to encourage, the people in our lives, whether it's ourselves or family members or children, start slow and build from there. Let's get back out there. Let's remember that for as helpful as the technology has been during this time, there is something better out there. And it might be frustrating because we talk a lot about, when is it going to get back to normal? When are we going to go back to the way things were? I don't think anybody has that answer. But, are we saying, okay, look, yep, I know that you've got to be 6 feet away from your friends. People might be wearing masks. But that is still better than not being able to see people. So can we go ahead and try it? Can we stick a toe in the water, so to say, and see how it goes? And then talk about it. And then try to build from there so that we aren't entirely dependent on technology when we no longer have to be, recognizing that things are going to be different. They're not going to be the same as they were in January or February of this year.
Yeah. If anyone's listening and they want more about that for how families can manage digital technology and social media, Dr. Horne's the author of the book, The Tech Talk, Strategies for Families in a Digital World. You can get it on the Our Sunday Visitor Catholic Bookstore, or you can get it on Amazon as well. I'm sure there's other places, but those are two that you might want to consider. But it's a great book, and it digs deep into that topic, which I know a lot of parents are concerned about. Dr. Horne, last question. If someone is listening and they want to speak with a counselor and get some kind of confidential help with whatever it is they're dealing with, where do you recommend that the average person go to first identify a good counselor or someone that could help?
Well, we're very blessed in the diocese to have a lot of really good resources for solid Catholic counseling, and chief among them is our Catholic Charities Family Services Counseling Program. Catholic Charities is open and has been open. Our counselors actually are seeing more sessions per week now with more people than they were prior to COVID, because we recognize stress is going up. The needs for counseling aren't going away. So we can provide secure HIPAA-compliant video conferencing. We are taking new clients. And anybody who's interested can go ahead and look at our website at ccda.net. And under the tab for Get Help, they can look up the information for counseling. All of our intake numbers are on there, along with the information on what that looks like.
Yeah, because Catholic Charities, I think people usually think about it in terms of, assistance to the poor and needy and so on. So this is one of those services that's, got a wider fan of opportunity for people to take advantage of and make contact. So again, ccda.net if you would like to reach out to a Catholic Charities counselor to the program there. Dr. Horne, thank you so much for your time and for all that you've offered us, not just in this podcast, but in the articles that you've written for the Arlington Catholic Herald. It's been widely received. It's some of our highest read content, especially throughout this pandemic. And we're just so grateful for all that you have done and all that you continue to do. So thank you, sir.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
You're listening to Searching for More. If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a review on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Also, make sure you follow the Diocese and the Arlington Catholic Herald on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And subscribe to our YouTube channels for regular videos that inspire, educate, and inform about the Catholic faith in our diocesan community.